BSE the fastest. If you want to get into the exchange, BSE is the fastest. That is the value of innovation. That is the value of dynamism bringing to an institution. So I feel very proud saying that our securities market is also one of the excellent in the world. When I keep attending the international conferences, to my utter surprise, I see that we have done much better than many of the countries. And there are a lot of things to learn from us in terms of banking, in terms of securities market. We are growing in the pension sector. We are equally sound in the insurance sector. So the point is that the international best practices have really been taken very religiously by all the regulators of this country, and we have been practicing it. We have been contributing very effectively to the international discussion and trying to improve the lot of rest of the countries apart from our own institutional framework. So a good financial stability architecture should have international best practices also in mind and improve governance. Today, when we count Dr. Jalan's contributions, it is endless, but I must mention one more which you have not heard. He was the chairman of the committee which was set up by SEBI for improving governance of market infrastructure institutions. So you remember, a lot of recommendations were given, and I spent almost 2 years debating that across all the stakeholders. We found solutions, and as it usually happens, most of the recommendations were accepted by SEBI, and we have a better system in place in terms of having inter-say shareholding by the market infrastructure institutions, having a better system. And this is not to suggest that we cannot innovate more and improve it further also. The other thing is that there is always information asymmetry between regulators, inside the market, between government and the market, government and the regulators. Any financial stability architecture should be built upon the base of having information symmetry. You cannot take any decision, any complete decision, unless you have information symmetry amongst all the stakeholders. One good architecture should have this. And the last point, let me tell you that you must have a good research base, high quality human resources, skilled people, committed people, highly integrated, people with high integrity to handle the so-called issue of risk. If you tell me today, we are talking about a selfie being taken by big people in terms of billions of dollars. Let me tell you, if you have to have a risk mitigation selfie, today is the day. Please take a selfie, because all the members present here, you have the former governor as also former finance secretary with you, who has the policy perspective. You have the government representative, you have SEBI, IRD, all the regulators with you, and a research organization which helps this sort of valuable discussion. It can be a risk mitigation selfie today. So let me tell you, when we sat down, think about the desirable financial stability architecture, we must also analyze, do we have all of them today in place? I compared it with 10, 12 jurisdictions who matter. The international experience is varied. We have statutory financial stability, whether you call it a committee or a council, in 1 or 2 jurisdictions, US and UK. We have many non-statutory organizations across various countries. I looked at Brazil, Germany, Argentina, South Africa, China, Indonesia, US, UK, and Australia. Experience is varied. I had interactions with those people at different points of time. But the message is the same. The crux of the matter remains the same. You have to be dynamic, keep innovative, and the last of all, keep talking. People should keep talking. FSDC was set up in December 2010. Since then, we already had 11 meetings. We have sorted out lots of issues, and managing risk is such a thing. If nothing happens, that's an achievement. In other areas, something has to happen to create news. If you are not creating news, it means it's going well. and that's the news about FSDC. There have been solid perspective sharing between the regulators, between the Reserve Bank and SEBI, between SEBI, IRDA, PFRDA, between government versus the regulators, amongst the regulators. There have been synergy redefined in FSDC. One has understood how synergy can bring you 1 + 1 is not 2, but it's 4 or 5. This is the experience. We are today a non-statutory institution as per the government notification of December 2010. FSLRC has recommended it to be a statutory one. That is still under consideration amongst so many other recommendations. Let us see what finally it takes, but one must admit that risk cannot be eliminated. Risk, if it is there, then gain is there. There is no risk, there is no gain. All of you realize that. It's just like your Atma, which says, Nainam chandanti sastrani, nainam dahati pavaka, na chainam kledanta bana society martha. Nothing can kill risk totally. However, we can mitigate risk. We can try our best and not through complex bottlenecks, as Dr. Jalan pointed out. He has highlighted the administrative bottleneck part of it. I cannot but absorb that risk of listening to the comment and can only wish that one can contribute as much as possible as far as trying to make government things as a facilitator, not as obstructionist, and also have a clear perspective. Many a time those bottlenecks come because there is information asymmetry. Government maybe doesn't know all parts of the of any problem. Maybe sometimes one thinks that one consideration rides over the other. The weightage given to the considerations may not be appropriate sometimes when we lead to decisions which create bottlenecks, and we must try to reduce. And talking about risk today, obviously I fully agree with the former speakers that today the risk is very low. The perceptual risk is absolutely brilliant. By perception, people think government will stay, the rules are going to change, things are going to improve, all stakeholders will be consulted even more than the earlier times. Government is supposed to work more productively and more stringently. People will be watched in terms of performance. So that and all of your contribution together makes me feel today that we're in a very, very, very good position today. The figures are also showing that we're improving, and as a solution to the VUCA, which is the volatility, uncertainty, and other things which you mentioned, now this food is FSDC, there won't be any VUCA left if all of you contribute. And now, coming to what more can be done in FSDC and in the improving our financial stability architecture, I feel a lot of research as well as information flow is required between stakeholders and the government, between stakeholders and the government. Not only vested interest objectives which keeps coming, but also a very high level innovative thinking as well as passing information that will be helpful. And a very strong research team is required, as suggested by FSLRC also. We have a finance and data management center that has been suggested. There have been task forces set up to look at those legislative changes that has been recommended by FSLRC. One of the task forces is getting into the finance and data management center issue. I'm a member of that also. There I feel that in terms of getting data in an integrated manner, we do not have it today. Every regulator regulates on the basic data. And when it comes to FSDC, getting a backup information much ahead of the schedule to mitigate the risk, it will be much, much better if we have that sort of real-time integrated data. And lastly, I do not see even in the longer term that there will be any doubt in things happening. Over the years I have seen, since sir will agree with me, that 1991, whatever started, the pace has only been tried to be improved all the time. Maybe gather pace due to political reasons. Maybe we had PFRDA non-statutory in 2004, but by 2013 we had a statutory PFRDA. The objectives are very clear, and on the basics, people do not disagree. That's the greatest point, apart from the demography and the will and the high level of morality which our people has, and we have to encash on our strong points, and I'm very hopeful that we are going to get into the limelight once again and trying to do much better than in the country. We have seen the growth rate improving in our case from whatever level it was, and reducing in case of China, which is a real threat that has been a part of discussion on every forum. Things will change and democracy will get in everything. Discussion, talking and inter-regulatory coordination, interstate coordination of all sectors will help us achieve the thing which we want, which is financial stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra, for touching upon various aspects of financial stability and the role of the FSDC in creating that. I think one key aspect around that is, as you correctly mentioned, around data, big data. I think no enterprise risk management, no risk management framework in the country can work unless you have a big data framework which supports it, so that everyone is able to take a uniform view of the risk that exists, and not, when I say uniform view, you're looking at the same data while taking a call, rather than, I'll give you an example. We're doing some work with a large steel conglomerate, and Dun & Bradstreet, as you know, provides risk management solutions on the credit risk and supplier risk side. And this conglomerate, apparently, or at least it was believed, had 4,500 large customers, and they were looking at 4,500. And when we deduplicated the data and we went into it, finally there were 1,700 unique customers. The different silos had different risks. So, I mean, this is one company. Can you imagine what happens in a country where people have got different data centers? So I think Dr. Mohapatra raised a very, very important point around getting uniform data view. And in the afternoon, I'm sure we'll have a technology-driven discussion also around it that emerges. I'm going to throw it up for questions now, since Dr. Charan has managed to push back his next appointment. And we're very grateful to you for that, sir. So, I think we have a few minutes of Q&A. If you can just raise your hand. Someone come to your mic. Identify, please, your first. Excuse me. First question, first hand up. And one, identify yourself, the question. Please make it a question and not a point addressed to someone specifically, and then we'll get it answered. Thank you.
My name is Jasawan from Offset Press. I'm the executive director there. One question to you, Dr. Charan. How do we stop cultural investors being cheated by these Ponzi schemes? It's going on for the last 20 years, one after another. How does the system allow this to happen and really not go to the systemic root cause and eliminate it?
No, I think this is a very important challenge for the regulators. It is happening, as you know, and it has gathered momentum. It started off in Istanbul at NBFC as an alternative way of what you might say, allowing people with money in areas with one bank to be able to provide money and business correspondence, informal systems of banking. But you are absolutely right that freedom has been exploited in terms of some of these concepts. So what is going to be, as you are seeing, that some people are going to jail now, who started the Ponzi scheme. As you are seeing, some are failing in the Ponzi scheme, and there is a tremendous public outrage. So I can look forward to the fact that we will start having a system of inspection which actually works. This is the last 10, 15 years that this is going like this. Earlier this was at a very small time, and suddenly you have actually people coming in like this. The real answer to this would be that on the NBFCs also, you need a regulatory supervision beyond the certain level. You can draw a line at 50 crores or 75 crores. But the real question is again of interest rates. Many of these Ponzi schemes pay interest rates. invest in their own companies under different names. So all this kind of thing is there. But if you see a few people going to jail, I think something will happen. In addition to the regulatory rule to try and make the NBFCs more transparent and more accountable. Not an easy task. Sorry, I can't ask you a question in a definitive form. The government has to take the lead.
Actually,
If I may say, Mr. Mohapatra, this is the area which requires, because there is always a struggle between different agencies. You know, I mean, the Reserve Bank has a mandate, it has an act, it has now, it can't start licensing, for example, these NBFCs, once or twice plus high. But then the flow of money, flow of genuine money to the rural areas, that becomes difficult. So there are lots of these issues, self-help groups and so on, and not an easy thing. So I think the government should bring them together and see what we can do. And maybe the most important starting point, maybe to put a limit on how much you can raise.
May I take that?
There is, of course, also the related issue of black money. All these schemes thrive because of black money.
May I take that shock and absorb it fully? And you are right, sir, very right. Both are related. FSDC is also the forum to discuss. And there have been grey areas which have been areas of innovation for financial risk takers, whether legal or illegal, that has caused this sort of Ponzi schemes. You have an act or a rule under regulation, people find gaps in it and they get into it. I will agree that you had a provision of collective investment scheme, but the provisions were such that something else was created to define not as a collective investment scheme. Things were happening, so we have to be better innovators than the illegal financial wizards. That's the first thing. Second thing, it is untrue that we did not know what was happening around. By we, I mean all of us citizens of India. When somebody gives you a return 3-4 times more than the normal return, there is a reason to be doubtful about it. It doesn't stop with Ponzi schemes. It happened with NSCL. It happened with, in many cases it happens. And it is not incorrect to say also that globe went down in 2007, Lehman crisis. It happened because of one word, which is greed. Greed by the CEOs who assessed those products, which actually was not that value, not AAA, and that boiled down to confusion created in markets, everything getting shattered thereafter. So, once we know that things are happening around us, people are aware about it, but then who takes care? Who should have the first charge of them? Who should start talking? Who should start catching? There was a gap there. Now today, after this Ponzi scheme getting into this serious business, RBI thought it is not defined as a NBFC. SEBI said it is not defined as a CIS, and it is also not a mutual fund. So this type of strict legal positioning by the regulators led to this happening for quite a few months. So my perception, I hope there is no media here. And when that multiplied beyond a limit, then we got cautious. So it is all about taking care, and I think the ordinance, if you read carefully, talks about any business having more than 100 crores or some such thing, then SEBI can get into it. So it's a very highly all-encompassing sort of provisioning that has been done to the best of our intellect and ability. Today, as of 2014, November 25th, we think that this should take care. But I won't be surprised when we sit next year, November 25th, 2015, talking about this, maybe something new would have to go. We have to keep our ears and eyes open, and you are the eyes and ears of the government, as also the regulators. Thank you.
Let me add a couple of points to that. See, that is what I call a regulatory perspective. That is, you create regulations, and when there are gaps, you create more regulations. There is another approach to this, is that the formal finance, that is banks, insurance, mutual funds, stock exchanges, have not reached Indian rural areas. In essence, you can create a lot of regulations, but if you are not reaching, then people will have no choice but to go to the money lender who charges you huge amounts and stuff like that. So it was an onus on the formal finance mechanism also to reach out. We didn't over the last 67 years. So in some sense, the technology has allowed us to reach out. Still, our members or banks, we are still city-centric, and we are not making people aware. So in some sense, regulators will make their regulations, but the onus is also on the system, which is formal, which is better, which is safer, to also market themselves, which we were a small little areas, banks and insurance, we were happy earning our salaries and stuff like that. That is one part. Second part is, even if you make regulations, if you are not able to implement. So what happens is you have tough regulations, but when it comes to taking a call, even when the person, that Ponzi is small or NSCL is small, you as a regulator have a choice to make a tough decision and tell him to stop, which we don't. Then you will have more regulations, but nothing actually comes out of it. So somewhere I think we need to do both.
Can I?
No.
Yeah, just to supplement the speaker. You see from the underlying incentive perspective of the fellow who is facing the investor and the investor interest, it boils down to the financial literacy, education, awareness that is on the demand side. Like the investor is not fully aware about the rate of return that can be offered, that is available in the market. And from the supply side, our financial institutions, we have a mandate to provide access, financial access to the untouched section of the society. So that has also not taken place. So basically, it is the financial inclusion that is from the supply side and financial literacy awareness from the demand side, which need to be addressed to not only by any single regulator, but all the financial sector regulator and the Department of Corporate Affairs jointly, because the task is very challenging. Thank you.
I'm going to request Mr. Nair if he has a perspective, but just before that, I'd actually like to take the point that Dr. Mohapatra made, which I think is a very relevant point, around the fact about greed. While I agree with Ashish that, yeah, you have rural Ponzi schemes, we all know them, we're not going to take names, but we all know them. There was no enforcement today, there's enforcement, people are in jail thankfully, and that will go away. But for the NSCL type issue, we have no one to blame except really ourselves rather than just the regulators. I know some of the investors in those schemes personally. They are not your average investor. They have not put in 50 and 100 and 2,000 rupees a month. These are sophisticated investors with fancy degrees, college education to play the market around the world. And they knew what they were getting into. But the bottom line was what Dr. Mohapatra said, greed. When they saw the kind of returns that they were getting or being promised, I think people got carried away without looking at the underlying aspect of the risk that really existed there. That brings back that old adage, right? That if it is too good to be true, it usually is. And the financial markets again and again and again prove it. That if something really looks too good to be true, it's not going to really be there. It's ephemeral, it's a mirage. So with that, Mr. Nair, if there's anything you'd like to add?
I tend to agree that this, I worked in SEBI for some time, and then we had this CIS issues, and we found that none of the companies were eligible to become CIS because the CIS had a certain regulatory framework, and these kind of Ponzi schemes fell between regulators. So there is this gap which they exploited, and mostly they used to go to court and get stays.
when the SEBI used to issue notices to them, they used to get stays from local courts, and therefore the regulator itself didn't have the power. Now they have given teeth to the regulator, and he said 100 crores and above is deemed to be a CIS, and therefore once the regulator has teeth, perhaps what Jawan said, we can stop it at the bud. Otherwise, these schemes keep growing and they keep getting stays from local courts, and they are very powerful people who run this. So we found it very difficult in Calcutta and West Bengal when we tried this. We had issued notices, so many of them, but most of them got stays from the lower courts, and they could keep getting stays at the higher courts also. And therefore, the regulator was constrained by the lack of power. And this activity was like falling between two regulators also. And therefore, there is this arbitrage which always happens. And people exploit it. There are very good legal minds who actually advise them how to get away, because once you issue a notice, they will say you don't have the power to do things. So we found this kind of activity, and therefore, my own feeling in the Indian Financial Code, which has now been, is being debated in the government, would be some remedy to this, because all these regulatory overlaps and underlaps would get covered, because they are not planning. I don't know how far it will take off. It's a little big subject to debate at this issue. But they are trying to cover the regulatory overlaps and underlaps and address it through the Indian Financial Code, which was actually written by eminent legal mind, Justice Sri Krishna. He has come up with a very nice report. Now, I don't know how far, how much can be implemented. But then that is perhaps the solution to the issue. I don't say these things will still happen. The credibility is there, greed is there, and the fact that we have not reached out to masses is a huge challenge to meet, the needs, financial needs of people, and as you said, awareness, tremendous lack of awareness, even among the so-called literate people. For example, NSCL was all informed investors. You can't say that they didn't go. They all came in Mercedes-Benz to pick up their money. So they were all putting money for greed. So they can't blame anybody but themselves, those people. But the poor people, yes, I really sympathize with them.
Thank you. Next question. I think the gentleman there put his one second. If you can identify yourself among the questions.
My name is Subodh Kumar. I am a company secretary of the company CMI. My question is Mr. Jalan. This is my question. I want to just know his point of view. Our government is a stable government, we know, and it is our opportunity. But my question is, Mr. Jaitley, Mr. Parikar, Mr. Sitaraman, even if Mr. Modi had no past experience as a cabinet minister. And I want to know how much it affects policy decision of the government.
Which policy are you referring to?
Policy regarding public, relating to public.
The more important.
And mostly in finance sector.
The more, we are an open country. So the fact that, say, the Minister for Housing or the Minister for Roads is not an architect or somebody who knows about roads is not really a constraint, because you make a policy decision based on your conception of what is of interest to the public. The public is a general public. So I don't see that is the pressure. Because if the 3-4 people that you name, they have governance experience, maybe in a different area. But we also had, after independence, we had a government which came to power, and you read a lot about Jawaharlal Nehru after independence, and they did something. Then we had a party and formulation. So I don't attach, I won't attach too much importance to actual experience on the ground. But I do attach a lot of importance to a thoughtful policy decision. And for that, you can always have advisors, and they have advisors. You can always call for consultative committees, and you can always have the experts, as I think Mr. Jaitley had done, to call economists to discuss, to bankers to discuss. And similarly, anybody can do it. At the level of the minister, What you need is to try and see what is in the public interest. Not that everybody does, but what is in the larger public interest. And to think about things at the ground level. And that I believe can be done. Not that it is being done. You know, every minister here now is powering on to or her and to himself or herself.
That's another question. Come back to you.
So I'm Pradeep Jain. I'm related to paper manufacturing industries and the hotel industry and engineering industries. In India, we have a lot of capacity, capability, market, everything we have. और आपके टाइम में हमें जब इंटरेस्ट रेट ठीक था तो बहुत अच्छी मार्केट में हमने ग्रो किया. आज की डेट में हम लोग कंपटीशन में पार होते जा रहे हैं. सब कुछ होने के बावजूद भी हमारे लिए बहुत ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट है, हाई इंटरेस्ट रेट, जो कि चाइना में काफी कम है और हमारे जितने भी कॉम्पिटिशन में है सबके अंदर बहुत ज्यादा कम है. उसकी वजह से हमारी सब इंडस्ट्री बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रगलिंग टाइम से निकल रही है और दे आर ऑल फेसिंग वेरी वेरी हार्ड टाइम. So I want to know the future, sir. We have invested a lot of money in our power sector, in our paper industry, in our hotel industry. A lot of industry is very badly affected, sir.
No, I think you have raised a very important point. And part of this, I mean, what you are saying, has also something to do with the market conditions. That there is a feeling which is not to, which is not demand-wise. If you look at the demand side also, that has also suffered, and people are uncertain. Interest rate per se, at the moment, is an issue because inflation rate has come down. So that is also another problem, that you are not, so we have an excess demand in industry, excess supply in industry, capacity-wise. Then we have interest rates, which in real terms has increased sharply. And three, the outlook as of now, in terms of investment, is become bleak or rather uncertain, because a lot of people are waiting to see what the government will do in terms of capital expenditure, in terms of investment. And when you see the fiscal deficit, then there's also this issue that would you be actually able to spend? So I think it's all interrelated, and I take your point that so far as the manufacturers are concerned, or those who are wanting to borrow money, the real interest rate has climbed sharply. So you are waiting for interest rates to come down. And I don't know whether this will happen, because the cost of borrowing from the banks, on an average, has not gone down, because they are all fixed deposits, most of them. But anyway, the issue that you have raised is a very crucial issue, and I hope we will resolve it through a lower interest rate rather than rising inflation. Okay.
So we'll just take a group picture. Can you just say your question and then we'll try and have it answered? Yeah. No.
Okay.
Thank you. Please forgive me, Kaushal. Thank you very much for.
I think if we just hear his question, because
Yeah.
Sir, first of all, I would like to thank DNB that they have restored that my experience आप सबको सुन पाए. आशीष जी ने एक छोटी सी बात बोली थी, एमएस का नाम लिया था, और मोहपात्रा जी ने बोला कि गवर्नमेंट के आईडीज इंजीनियर्स ओपन रखने के लिए. सर, पहले जैसे एमएस हुआ है, हिंदी स्कीम्स हुई है, अभी भी एट प्रेजेंट देयर आर सर्टेन थिंग्स लाइक कि कंपनीज आर ब्रिंगिंग आईपीओस, they are charging premium, they are giving returns, also fair returns, but after some time their prices fall down due to regulatory issues. They are suspended from trading from the browsers and they get delisted. In this manner they take away public money
and no action can be taken against.
Sure. I think we get the drift. Companies which should not be raising public funds, raising it at a premium and then disappearing or being treated.
Ashish, you want to take a shot at it?
So I'll get Ashish to answer that question.
Excellent surveillance system.
Sure. So we'll have Ashish answer it 1 second. But before Dr. Jalan goes, a small token of our appreciation on everyone's behalf to Dr. Jalan.
I'm sorry to disturb the meeting. Okay, that's all.
Yes, Ashish.
I think in one question you have several questions. Basically, there was a great institution called Controller of Capital Issues, which determined how much price the company should come out and who should come out and who should not come out. In some sense, it connects to the risk management. Earlier, when India became independent, we became Socialist Republic of India, which we still are as per Constitution. And the socialist framework is basically about collective management of risk. That time moves, risk arrives, but somebody is buying, somebody is selling. So they have risks on both sides. If you match them, there is no risk because ultimately one guy is going to lose, one guy is going to gain, and nothing is going to happen. Similar examples are given in futures and options and all, saying somebody is buying, somebody is producing wheat, that is a farmer, and modern bread requires wheat. So if you get them merged, then there will not be any prices for wheat for modern bread and so on, or even for the farmer. Having said that, CCI was what I call a large umbrella, a collective risk management on the heads of all investors in India. That they will determine in their wisdom what should be the premium, what should be the price, and so on and so forth. And that was what we call prescriptive method. That is a great Brahmin sitting in Delhi, he was very wise, no doubt, but he will determine all companies' price with share. Then came a new framework saying that ultimately who is selling the share, he is feeling that Brahmin is not good. Let other people decide. If somebody wants to pay for it, let him decide. So then came a disclosure-based system. That is, when a company comes to the market, it is supposed to disclose everything about how many directors, how many court cases are there, how many this are there, how many what is his business, and so on and so forth. And now from prescriptive method of CCI to disclosure method of SEBI has come in, which is saying that you are an adult. I am not going to manage your risk for yourself. You study the company, all the details are given, and you put money at your risk. There are companies where you put in 10 rupees like Infosys, and it may become, by the way, just to give you an anecdotal example, Infosys, when it came out with a public issue, it was I think 70 rupees, and it devolved. Nobody bought that shares. And that 70 rupees would have become 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees by now. Okay, when I am just making some rough calculation in my mind. Nobody then, when they make money, nobody tells that it's government's duty. It is their brilliance, right? Only when their money goes, then it is a government's duty. So what SEBI is saying is that I have made a disclosure-based framework. Everything is disclosed. If you still want to put it, nobody is forcing you. Nobody is forcing an investor of putting money there in a company. And there are companies whose prices go up, and there are companies whose prices go down because of a variety of reasons. If those people don't give information in time post facto, that is after listing, they don't give information in time, or material information are not disclosed, as I think Mr. Mohapatra also said about asymmetry of information. That is basically breached between the exchanges and the SEBI. But we are not taking guarantee for the settlement. Basically, your shares will prices always go up. That is not a guarantee because companies, their performances may go up or down. Interest rate go up, then paper manufacturers come in trouble, and their shares go down. So those kind of business risks you have to understand and invest. And you also have a right, fortunately, unlike any other contract, when you buy stocks, once it is listed, you can sell anything. So anytime you feel like that you are invested in a company which is not going to do well or which is not doing well, kindly sell. Rather than waiting, making losses and then saying government should help me. Why I am telling you this is, somewhere on the line, perspectives have to be very clear. That now, instead of carrying a large umbrella over the head of everyone in the country, you are given your own umbrella. If you want to get wet, it is your choice. But if you don't want to get wet, you start raising your umbrella, right? So that's basically for me a perspective which normally most people don't have. And newspapers also or media tends to highlight this as saying prices have gone down, so it's government's fault. Prices go up, it is my brilliance. Right? There is nothing more.
Supplement without hearing the question fully and the answer given fully. That's how government does it. Broadly, he has defended the government. But what I personally felt, knowing not so much about all these IPO pricing business, but when I was in SEBI Secondary Market Advisory Committee and I was handling SEBI and capital market for 4-5 years, 2007 to 2012, before handling financial stability. This issue has been discussed in SEBI forum also many times. I personally felt there is also an element of greed in this business. The price which is fixed or price which is arrived at is also a merchant banker who is engaged by the company. So always the discussion boils down to having a good merchant banker, giving a fair price. If it does badly, it should be punished. And the price fixing also has to be rechecked and rechecked before getting to the market. So this only supplements to what she said.
So thanks. I think we've had a very, very engaging first session. I want to thank everyone for their time and attention. We'll take a break for lunch, and in the afternoon I think we're going to have an equally engaging session. And this is actually going to look at systemic risk in running business in the current environment and the emerging architecture of JRC. So we're going to have some very good panelists. They're already here, and I'm sure we're going to have a very engaging discussion. Now, at this point, let's break for lunch. But before I do that, I have a very pleasant duty to perform, which is to thank all our panelists on everyone's behalf here and present them with a small token of our appreciation. I'll start with Dr. Mohapatra. Ashish. We'll see you after lunch.